The dusk settled over Dry Creek with the way of an old hymn, the kind sung not in churches, but in the hush of tired hearts. The air was thick with dust and whispers, lanterns flickering to life in crooked windows, as if to catch the secrets that roamed the street. Clara May Whitlow stood at the edge of that light, her small valise by her boots, her braids slipping loose from a day's weary travel. She had known rejection before, but it never lost its sting, and the murmurs sliding over her like a cold wind told her she was being measured once more. A woman alone was always a spectacle in this town. A woman carrying the bruises of rumor was worse than that. Mrs. Kettle, round and sharp-eyed, barred the doorway of her boarding house with folded arms. "Not under my roof, Miss Whitlow," she said, her tone loud enough for the two men loitering across the street to hear. "This is a respectable place." The implication hung heavy, cruel in its precision. Clara bowed her head, swallowing the ache that rose in her throat. She might have pleaded, might have explained that she had coin enough, that she asked for no trouble, but explanations had never rescued her before. Silence was all she had left. Her grip tightened on the valise handle. She could feel eyes upon her, the way one feels a storm long before it breaks. A man coughed in the corner by the mercantile. Another spat into the dirt, and their glances met in silent judgment. Shame, old companion, climbed her spine. She turned slightly, as though she might walk away, but there was nowhere to go, no kin, no friend, no door that would open without cost. It was then that Silas Boone, broad of shoulder yet quiet in presence, paused on his way down the boardwalk. His boots were worn. The brim of his hat shadowed half his face, and a scar along his jaw caught the lantern light. He had a way of carrying stillness with him, as though he were carved from the same cedar as the beams of his small cabin. He took in the sight of Clara, the valise at her feet, the set of Mrs. Kettle's mouth. He did not frown, did not curse, but his gaze steadied like a weight against the cruelty in the air. "She needs a place," he said simply. His voice was low, the kind that never raised itself to win a room, yet it traveled all the same. Mrs. Kettle bristled. "She needs more than a place. Silas Boone. She needs a husband to speak for her, or she'll bring scandal with her shadow." Clara's cheeks burned, not from the words themselves. They were familiar enough, but from the public bearing of her loneliness. Before she could gather her voice, Silas adjusted the brim of his hat and said, "My cabin's got a spare room. It's warmer than the street." No softness, no persuasion, just a fact offered without flourish. Clara's first thought was not gratitude, but fear. To step into a man's cabin, unwed, would stoke gossip fiercer than anything Mrs. Kettle might whisper. Yet as her eyes lifted to meet his, she saw no hunger there, no glint of triumph, only patience, as if he would wait until she found her courage. The wind stirred her skirt around her boots. She drew in a breath that tasted of dust and resignation. "Thank you," she said, the words fragile, nearly lost in the night. The ride out of town was marked by silence. Silas led his bay, gelding steady along the trail, and Clara sat behind him, valise secured, the rhythm of the horse's gait thrumming through her bones. The moonlight silvered the sagebrush, painted the horizon in soft pewter. Clara kept her hands folded tight, unsure where to rest them, unsure of how to breathe in the presence of a man who had neither mocked nor demanded. Once, the valise threatened to slip, and Silas reached back, catching it with one hand without breaking stride. He said nothing, and neither did she, but the gesture lingered longer than words might have. His cabin came into view at the edge of a meadow, lantern glow in a single window casting amber onto the ground. The place was small, cedar-timbered, with smoke curling faintly from a chimney. He dismounted, offered his hand only once, and when she shook her head, he stepped aside, allowing her space. Inside, the scent of wood smoke and leather greeted her. The spare room was bare but clean, quilt folded at the foot of the bed. Silas lit a lantern, set bread and a tin of water on the table, then moved toward the porch. "Door's yours to lock," he said, hand on the frame. "No one will trouble you here." Clara's throat ached. She nodded, unable to speak. He left her with quiet dignity, the boards creaking under his boots as he stepped into the night. In the days that followed, Clara felt the weight of town gossip tighten around her. At the mercantile, women drew their shawls closer, whispering into the folds. Men smirked with cruelty that dared her to meet their eyes. Deacon Harlan muttered as she passed the church steps. Under his roof now. We all know what that means. Each word struck like a stone, yet Clara began to notice something unfamiliar in the rhythm of her shame. Silas did not flinch. He carried himself as though the gossip were wind-rattling shutters, loud, perhaps, but harmless against cedar walls. He neither denied nor explained. He simply lived, his quiet steadiness casting a shadow larger than any rumor. Nights by the fire became the measure of her days. She would sit with needle and thread, mending her dress, while he repaired a bridle or sharpened a tool. Silence stretched between them, not heavy but alive, like the hush before dawn. She studied his hands, the way they moved with care, never hurried, never careless. One evening, words rose in her before she could catch them. I've never shared a bed. Her voice was no louder than the crackle of the fire, yet filled the room with a startling honesty. She expected laughter or pity or worse, a proposition masked in kindness. Instead, Silas set down the leather strap he had been working, lifted his eyes to hers, and said with the same quiet certainty he had carried from the start, "Then share mine for life." The words did not strike like a demand, nor even like a courtship. They came as a vow, offered without flourish, as steady as the rhythm of his breath. Clara felt something loosen inside her chest, some chain that had held her for years. She turned her face slightly, hiding the tears that threatened, and the firelight seemed to glow softer, kinder. It might have ended there, in that fragile stillness, but the town demanded its spectacle. A week later, Silas brought her with him to Saloon, a place she would have never dared alone. The room was thick with smoke, laughter, and the clatter of glasses. Conversation dulled when they entered together. Elias Dunn, a shopkeeper with more spite than sense, leaned from his stool and sneered loud enough for all to hear. "So Boone, keeping her bed warm now?" The words cracked like a whip. Laughter rippled, sharp and eager. Clara froze, shame flooding her veins. She thought of fleeing, of shrinking small enough to vanish. But before she could move, Silas straightened, his height cutting the room's noise in half. His gaze, calm and unflinching, found Elias. "She's under my roof," he said, voice steady as stone, "because I'll not see her cast out. And if you want it plainer, I'll call her mine. Not for scandal. For life." The room hushed. The laughter died on open mouths. In the silence that followed, Clara felt her heart pound with something fierce and unfamiliar. Dignity, returned her not by defense but by a man's refusal to bow. She turned slightly, meeting his profile, and knew the truth of his words was not for them, not for gossip's hunger, but for her alone. That night, as they walked back beneath the lantern glow, Clara's hand brushed against his. He did not take it, did not force closeness, but the warmth that lingered between them was more binding than any clasp. She lifted her eyes to the stars scattered across the vast western sky and felt, for the first time in years, that she belonged beneath them. And perhaps you, too, have known the weight of whispers, the sting of doors closed before you. Remember this. Then sometimes a bed is not just wood and blanket, but the place where shame is laid to rest, where two souls find sanctuary not in possession but in promise. And if ever you are named unworthy, know there are hearts that wait to bear your burden. Not for a night, not for a season, but for life.